Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to the past. It is New Year's Eve day, Old Year's Day. It's the 31st of December, and this is going to be my first video in a series I'm going to be doing about the TBR Spin. Now, the TBR Spin is a reading event, readathon, that is hosted by Sarah over at Freshly Read Books and Jill of the Book Poly. And what they invite us to do is grab a stack of 12 books that we want to read in 2024, and then each month they will give us a prompt so that we can use that prompt to pick a book from that stack of 12. I started doing this last year, but I kind of fell off the wagon a bit, but I really wanted to join in again this year because I think it's such a fun way to go through the books on your TBR, and they always come up with really fun prompts as well. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about the 12 books I've got on my TBR first. So here is my stack of 12 books, and what I decided to do this year, I got 6 books that were on my TBR the longest, and then 6 of them were my most recent additions to my physical owned TBR. So the 6 oldest books are actually all books I bought in 2022. So last year I did a challenge where I had all my books from before 2022 on my TBR on like these books will self-destruct list. So it was my goal to either read them in 2023 or unhold them. So yeah, I don't have any books older on my TBR, but I do have these 6 from 2022. I'm gonna go through them very briefly because I don't want this video to become too long. So the first one is The Water Dancer by Ta-nehisi Coates, which is a book with a focus on slavery, and I think it has some magical, fabulous elements to it as well. I've got The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak. This was super popular when it came out. Everyone whose taste in books I respect has loved this book, so that's why I picked it up at the time. I've got Surfacing by Margaret Atwood. I would love to get through some of Margaret Atwood's backlist titles, so I picked this one up when I saw it at a secondhand bookshop at the time. There is The Dangers of Smoking in Bed by Marianna Enriquez. This is a translated short story collection. I have read Things We Lost in the Fire by her, which is also a short story collection, and I really love that one. She writes kind of horror-esque, dark, unsettling kind of stories. Yeah, so I'm really looking forward to having this one on the stack. Then we've got The Women of Brewster Place by Gloria and Naylor. This is one of those modern classic books by black authors that keeps on popping up on lists of like books by black American authors you should read. Yeah, I've heard nothing but good things about this one. And then lastly, from my stack of books from 2022 is Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. I actually got this in a sort of Secret Santa book exchange in Christmas of 2022. And I was so surprised to get this really beautiful hardback edition, and the person who got it for me got it at a indie bookstore, You and Me Books in New York. I have read Everything I've Never Told You by Celeste Ng. I really enjoyed that book, but I haven't read anything else by her, so I'm hoping I will enjoy this one as well. And then the second half of my stack is all the books I got most recently. Some of these have been on my wish list for longer, but we're talking about the books that were actually added to my physical shelf most recently. So first of all, we've got Crossing to Safety by Wallace Stegner. This is a book that's been on my radar for a very long time. Again, one of those sort of modern classic backlist books that whenever I hear someone talk about it, they always say they love it. We've got Travels with Charley by Steinbeck. This is a non-fiction book, a travelogue of his time traveling through the United States with his dog Charley. I have loved John Steinbeck's fiction books. I really love his writing style, so I'm hoping this one will work as well. Then we've got Real Life by Brendan Taylor. This is also a book that I've heard a lot of people praise, and therefore was sort of in the back of my mind to read someday. So I picked it up when I saw it in a secondhand bookstore. I don't really know what it is about, and I haven't watched the video yet, but I saw that Jill of the Book Bully had a video on the worst books of 2023, and I think she had the cover of this one on her thumbnail as well. So I think I will probably hold off watching that video until I've read this. Then I've got I Contain Multitudes by Yong, The Microbes Within Us and a Grander View of Life, which is a non-fiction book all about microbes. This is a book that is on my 40 before 40 list. Another non-fiction book, this is How the Word is Passed, A Reckoning with the History of Slavery Across America by Clint Smith. I think he talks about the history of America and slavery specifically through the lens of different locations in America, which sounds like a really, really interesting read. And the last book on the list is a book that I won in a giveaway, and that is Empusion by Olga Tokarczuk. This is her latest book, I think. I'm not even sure if it's translated in English yet. This is the Dutch translation. I haven't read anything by Olga Tokarczuk yet, so I was very excited to have won this book and got this and to get this in the mail. So yeah, those are my books on the stack for 2024. Sarah and Jill did a live stream video yesterday. I couldn't watch it yesterday, so I watched it this morning, and I stopped at the point where they were gonna do the actual spin. So I'm just gonna continue watching now and then see what my first book will be.
All right, guys, everyone get ready because we're gonna share the wheel.
Oh, they're excited. Hooray.
Okay.
I'm excited. I'm not nervous. I'm excited.
Are we ready? All right, let's go. Let's go. 3, 2, 1. Let's spin. Can you hear the spin or no?
Yeah,
okay.
I can.
Oh
Are we starting with this swap? Somebody literally just said, I love my stack. I don't want to swap.
I can't believe we're starting with a swap. Frig.
Okay, first we've got a book swap. I think this is a really fun element of the TBR Spin, is that sometimes we get a swap. So you swap a book out of your stack for another book. So this one is swap an unread book, which in case is any of the stack for me, for a book you've already read. So yeah, I'm gonna have a think about that one. Okay, LOL, that was just a practice spin. If you haven't done TBR Spin before, it can be quite chaotic. So now I'm going to go on to the actual spin. Let's see.
Hey, listen, the vibes in the chat are like, that was a practice spin. Let's just do a different spin.
It feels weird to start with a swap when you...
Yeah, okay.
Just for all this work.
That was just practice. That was just a joke, guys.
That was just practice. But
okay.
also, if you want to reread a book sometime this year, go for it.
Exercise your own agency. Okay, we're gonna spin again. This is the real spin. That was just practice. This is the real one. Oh my god, no. What is this? No. We're not doing that. Stop it. Third time's a charm.
If you saw the spin, no, you didn't. If you saw the second spin, also no, you didn't.
The third one is what we're gonna do. Yes. Yes.
This is. I don't think I have a Canadian book.
Okay. Yep, utter chaos. So we've got a Canadian book. So I know for definite that Margaret Atwood is Canadian, so that is definitely an option. I don't actually think any of the other authors are Canadian, but maybe they are. But my first pick of the year for January 2024 will be Surfacing by Margaret Atwood, and I'll check in with you when I've read this book. I finished my first TBR Spin book, which was Surfacing by Margaret Atwood. This is one of her earlier novels, published in 1972, I think. It's about this young woman who goes on a weekend trip to a small island somewhere in Canada. I can't remember if the book mentions exactly where it is, but it's a very remote place. And she goes up there for a weekend with her boyfriend and another couple. The two men are working on this film project together, and we also soon find out that our protagonist actually grew up on that small island, and she wants to visit to find out what happened to her father, who has basically just disappeared without a trace. And she wants to visit this cabin to find out what has happened to him. So on the surface, no pun intended, it's a mystery novel with maybe a slight horror element to it, but it goes a lot deeper than that. It really explores the main character, her psyche. We learn that she grew up very isolated from society, with parents who were extremely distrustful of other people, and we just see how that has damaged her. It is not explicitly stated, because I'm guessing maybe the term didn't even exist back in the 70s, but I feel like she might be suffering from complex PTSD. We found out that she's been divorced. She was forced to have an abortion. There is also the other couple that they are with. That's also a very complicated relationship with a lot of abuse and coercion. There's a theme of anti-Americanism going on as well, where they are immediately suspicious of any American tourist that visits the island. So there's just a lot of layers in this book. I'm not really good at explaining. I'm just saying that you can't really capture it in a small summary. I really enjoy this though. I really love Margaret Atwood's writing style. I'm always underlining a lot of lines and paragraphs in her book because I just really love her turn of phrase. I feel like she has the kind of writing that slows you down. You know, you'll read it and you go along with the story, but then there's just some sentences that you just keep on coming back to, and you realize just how deliberate these sentences are. You know, like this is not just a sentence. She has used these particular words and put them in this specific order, and it is not accidental that they are. She's trying to say something by putting it in this exact way. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense of this. I'll give you an example because I underlined some things. So for example, there is a small part here where they are sitting by the lake, and it says, "The wind starts again, brushing over us. The air warm, cool and fluid. The trees behind us moving their leaves. The sound ripples. The water gives off icy light, zinc moon breaking on small waves. Loon voice, each hair on my body lifting with a shiver. The echoes deflect from all sides, surrounding us. Here everything echoes." So just on the surface is just describing the scene, but then that last sentence here, everything echoes. You know, when you know this woman is going to a place where she grew up and maybe remembering her past, you know, that sentence has a whole other way to it. And yeah, I just really love how layered Margaret Atwood's writing is in that way. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book. The only thing I will say that I didn't really enjoy the last part, and I can't really say why because I don't want to spoil the plot, but it just kind of lost me towards the end. But other than that, I thought it was really good. Just a really good deep dive, character study, social commentary, feminist kind of novel to really like sink your teeth into, even though it does all that under 200 pages. So yeah, that was my first TBR Spin book, 11 more to go, and I'll catch up when the next spin is announced. I just saw that the second spin is announced, the spin for February, so I'm using the last of the light to film this. I've just watched the intro. Jill has been ill, poor her. But yeah, let's get into February spin. Okay, I think something went wrong with the screen recording, but that's fine. The prompt is to read a book that makes you feel like you're outside in the sun, which I think is such a fun prompt for February, because, you know, it's one of the more miserable months of the year. So yeah, let's see what I've got in my stack. So I think it's gonna be either this one, The Island of Missing Trees. I'm pretty sure this is set in the summer. Cyprus Island makes me feel like summer anyway, so I'm hoping it's set in the summer, or on a sunny day. Or this one maybe, Travels with Charley by Steinbeck. That kind of feels like a outside sun kind of book. Yeah, it'll be one of these two. I think right now this one appeals to me the most. So that'll be my book for February. Right, I have finished reading The Island of Missing Trees by Elif Shafak, and I don't think this is as good as everybody says it is, which is such a disappointment because I really thought I would love this book. So at the start of this book we meet Ada, a teenage girl. She lives in London with her father Costas, and we learn that her mother Daphne has died quite recently, about 11 months ago. Ada and her dad used to be quite close, but the grief of the loss of her mother and his partner has kind of driven them apart. Ada's aunt comes to visit, which is quite a big deal because she has never had any contact with her aunt. Her dad is a Greek Cypriot and her mother was a Turkish Cypriot, and when they announced their relationship, both their families broke contact with them. Kostas has never really spoken to his daughter about that, about his past in Cyprus, but now that her aunt comes to visit, a lot of these stories and the whole old hurt will come up again. Then we move back to 1970 Cyprus, where Kostas and Daphne are young lovers. They're trying to find a place where they can meet in secret. The island is at a state of civil unrest, and it is just before the Turkish invasion of Cyprus. If their family would find out that they were together, you know, they would certainly not approve, but it could also potentially be dangerous. Certain events force them apart. Kostas moves to London and they lose touch, but eventually they meet up again in Cyprus in the early 2000s. He works as a botanist, doing research on fig trees, and Daphne is working on a project where they are finding skeletons and bones of people who were killed during the war, and they try to identify them and bring them back to their families. And then weaving all this together is a fig tree who gets her own narrative in the story. She stood in the inn where Kostas and Daphne used to meet in secret, and later they took a cutting of that tree to London, where they grew it in their backyard. So all this really sets up for a book that I should enjoy. I love that it has a mix of historical fiction and contemporary fiction. I love the setting in Cyprus, learning about the history of what happened in 1970s Cyprus and how it impacted the islanders. I liked that the story had a strong focus both on nature and on food. It explores themes that I find very interesting, such as grief, immigration, intergenerational trauma. There's a lot of elements in this book for me to love, and yet I didn't. One of the things that didn't work for me in this book is that it had a lot of telling and not showing. I'll give you an example. So at one point, Ada and Miriam are having a moment together. They are unpacking Miriam's suitcase. They're just chatting and getting to know each other. And then that chapter ends with this sentence. Miriam smiled, and for the first time since her aunt arrived, Ada felt the distance between them closing just a little. And for me, you don't need to tell me that, because I just read it. I just witnessed that scene, and I could see from that they were bonding. And similar things happen throughout the book, and I don't like it when an author does that, because it makes me feel like the author doesn't trust me as a reader, like they don't trust me to understand what is happening if they don't explain it. I also thought the characters in this book were rather flat and boring. For all that happened to these characters in this book, I would have expected them to be a lot more complex, but rather they almost feel like characters, or maybe more like a representative of a larger group. Like Ada, she feels like the voice of all teenagers of immigrant parents who want to know their family histories, but their parents don't talk about it because they don't want to pass on the trauma. But she doesn't have much personality of her own. I just think the author could have dived a lot deeper in these characters and made them a lot more interesting. I think the themes that Elif Shafak explores in this story were very interesting, especially the effects of trauma and immigration on different generations. I really appreciated what she was trying to say in this book. I think in that way the book is a great conversation starter. I'm sure in book clubs this book would lead to some really great discussions. I think she's very knowledgeable on these themes, and she has a lot of interesting things to say. I would love to read something like an essay collection that Elif Shafak would write on these themes. But the way it is put in this particular story feels really clunky. It feels like it is forced in, like she really wanted to talk about these topics, and she was gonna put them in the story no matter what. Maybe that ties into what I said about the characters as well, because often in conversations they would have these really insightful things to say, but it wouldn't feel like the character talking, it would feel like the author talking. I looked up some reviews of the book, both good and bad, and the narrative from the tree seems to be quite a polarizing element. I personally really like that part. I like that it is a character in itself, because it's a character that can only observe but not act, and I think that makes for a really interesting point of view. What I didn't like is that the tree would sometimes get visits from animals, like say a mouse or a butterfly, and they would tell the tree things that would explain things in the story. Again, with the telling, not the showing, I didn't like that the author felt like she would have to bring in animals, talking animals, to tell us things that we could figure out ourselves from what is happening in the rest of the book. Okay, I think I will stop now because I don't want to turn this into too much of a rant. I'm just sad that this is a book that has so much potential that didn't come into fruition. I can see why a lot of people love it. It's very accessible, it reads quickly, it makes you think about important topics, but unfortunately it just didn't work for me. So that was my February read. Not a great success, but it was a book that was on my shelves for quite a long time, so I'm glad I finished it now. I think I'll add one more round to this video, so I'll see you for the March spin. It's time for the March spin. I've got my stack of books right next to me. You can't quite see it, but it's right here. Let's see what the spin is for March. Okay, a book that will heal you. Huh. Okay. I have to have a think about that. Okay, this wasn't the easiest prompt, so I had a little think and a little read through all the blurbs of the books again. And I ended up choosing Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng. And I'll read you a little bit of the blurb to try and explain why I think this book will fit. So it's about this young boy. He's living with his father, and his mother, who's a poet, she has left him when he was 9 years old. And it says, Bert, the boy, has grown up disavowing his mother and her poems. He doesn't know her work or what happened to her, and he knows he shouldn't wonder. But when he receives a mysterious letter containing only a cryptic drawing, he is pulled into a quest to find her. His journey will take him back to the many folktales she poured into his head as a child, through the ranks of an underground network of librarians, into the lives of children who have been taken in, and finally to New York City, where a new act of defiance made the beginning of much-needed change. Our Missing Hearts is an old story made new, of the way supposedly civilized communities can ignore the most searing injustice. It's a story about power and limitations of arts to create change, the lessons and the legacies we pass on to our children, and how any of us can survive a broken world with our hearts intact. So I feel like this is a book where the main character goes through a process of healing in a way. So yeah, that's what I chose to read for March. I have finished my book for the March spin, which was Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Ng, and this was such an unexpected delight. I don't know why I'm so surprised, because I have loved her other work before. Maybe it was just because I didn't really know what this book was about, and it wasn't really what I expected, but in a good way. So this book is about a 12-year-old boy named Noah, but he calls himself Bert. He lives together with his father, who is a teacher, and they live in a small apartment on a university campus. They always keep to themselves, and Bert is always told to keep a low profile and not to draw any attention to himself. And one day Bert gets a postcard from his mother. She had left the family when he was about 6 years old. Bert doesn't really know why. His dad never really talks about her, and whenever he hears his dad talk about her to other people, it almost seems like he's glad that she's left. Bert is still very fascinated by this postcard, and after a while he realizes that the drawing on the postcard, which is just like loads and loads of cats all drawn in different positions, he realizes that that is a scene from a fairy tale that his mother used to tell him when he was a small kid. And that kind of gets the story going. The first part of the book is almost like a quest where he is trying to find his mother. And you also start to realize quite early on in the novel that there's something a little bit off about the world Bird is living in. In the beginning it reads like a contemporary story, until you start noticing things that are just a little bit strange, and it becomes clear that this is not a contemporary story but a very near future dystopian story. It is set about 10 years after a big economic crisis, which is then referred to as crisis with a capital C. There is something called PACT, which stands for Preserving American Culture and Traditions. There's a lot of racism and prejudice against Asian people in particular. It even goes so far that Asian children are removed from their families, and how this all comes together and how it relates to the story of Bird, I'll let you discover for yourself. I really enjoyed this. First of all, I think Celeste Ng writes beautifully. I love her word choice. I love how she constructs a sentence. It's not overwrought or overly flowery, but there is like a certain beauty to her language. I was really impressed with how she creates a world that's so frighteningly close to our current society. She has taken elements of the world we live in today, and just taken them slightly further, like anti-Asian discrimination and how that has increased during the pandemic, how removing children from their families can be seen as a political strategy. Think about indigenous children who were forced to go to residential school, and more recently immigrant families who get separated at the border. There is a big part of protesting and activism in this book as well, and it's definitely a book that shows you what could happen if we're not more careful. But I do think in the end this is a hopeful book as well. There's a strong sense of fighting for what's right, for working together on a common goal. It's about the strength of stories and poetry and how this can inspire people. That's an important aspect of this story as well. And I love how librarians are the unsung heroes of this book, because aren't they in real life as well? I must say that even though there is a definite plot in this book, it does stay secondary to the overall world building and character development and the exploring of ideas in this book. And I think especially in the second part it gets a little bit slow and it loses a bit of its momentum. It does pick up again later on in the book, but if I had to add a criticism to this book, it would be that the middle part of this could be a little bit shorter. And that's why I didn't end up giving it the full 5 stars. But yeah, I still really love this book. Definitely my favorite of the 3 TBR Spin books so far. Would I say this was a healing book, since that was the prompt for March? I think so, but not necessarily in the way I expected. This book is in part about the healing power of words and literature and poetry. So I did come away with this with a sort of invigorated feeling. I was in a mild reading slump. I didn't even really realize it, but I was very much in a all books are kind of meh kind of mood. I'm still not sure whether it was me or it was the books I was reading, but this book did get me out of that mood. So yeah, in that way it was healing. So yeah, I'm gonna close the video now. Like I said, I think I will do these videos quarterly. I've really been enjoying the spin so far. I love the prompts that Sarah and Jill have come up with. And yeah, it's been a good time. If you want to join in with the TBR spin, I don't think it's too late. The next spin will be at the beginning of April. And instead of starting with 12 books, you can just start with 9 books for the rest of the year. It's a lot of fun. I highly recommend joining in with the TBR spin. If you have any thoughts or comments or anything you want to talk about any of the books I talked about in this video, please leave your comments down below. I always love having a chat with you. Thank you so much for watching. It was really nice having you here. Yeah, that's it for today. I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.